Hello and welcome to Nbyula Talks. Before we begin, we have a few updates and reminders for you. We would love to have you be part of our Nbyula community. And you can do so by logging on to www.nbyula.com, where you can join communities related to your area of interest, register for upcoming Nbyula Talks, book one-to-one skylifts, and view other upcoming events. You can also take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners or the speaker by sending a connection request. When you connect with the speaker, you will be able to contact them directly as well as receive updates about their upcoming talks. Kindly note that during this session, you will not be able to switch on your camera or unmute your mic. To ask questions during the talk, go to the audience chat, type your question, and select Post your question. If your question has not been answered during the talk, you will be notified once it's been answered, or if your question has not been answered during the talk, you can go to www.nbyula.com and spin a quest, and your questions will be answered. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this talk broadens your horizons and takes you to new learning heights. Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Sarah, and today we'll be together going through the writing task 1 and looking at process diagrams and how to answer those, right? So let's get started. I hope all of you are doing well today and ready to learn. Right. Also, before we begin, I'd just like to ask you all a question. I'm just sharing a poll in the chat. So go ahead and answer the question. The question is, which section of the IELTS have you found most difficult so far? If you've been preparing or if you've attempted the IELTS exam, which section has been the most difficult? Is it the writing section or the reading section? Okay, you'll have time during the talk as well to, put in your poll answers. So let's go on to today's talk. So as I said before, today we're learning how to answer the IELTS academic writing task, and the question would be process diagrams. Okay, so before we get into all of this, let's have a brief introduction to the IELTS. For those of you who are new to the IELTS or those of you who know about the IELTS already, this will just be a quick summary and a quick recap for you. So first of all, IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System, and it's for those non-native English language speaking people who are looking to work, study, or migrate abroad. The IELTS exam tests your 4 language skills, and that is your reading, your listening, your speaking, and your writing. And again, as I've said before, we'll be looking at the writing section today. So first of all, let's kind of look at what the IELTS writing section is all about, and that too, task 1. So task 1, you'll have 20 minutes to write 150 words or a little bit more in a formal writing style. Okay. The next thing is that it's important to know about the assessment criteria so that you'll know how you're going to be marked during the exam. Okay, so just have a look at the writing, the criteria. So first of all, we have task achievement, then we have lexical resource, coherence and cohesion, and grammatical range and accuracy. So when you're being assessed, the criteria that the examiner will be looking at would be task achievement. First of all, how well you answer the question, whether you've answered all parts of the question, whether you have, put the correct details in, whether you've added the correct information according to the question. Next is your lexical resource, where the examiner will be looking at the wide range of vocabulary that you've used. Then you have coherence and cohesion. How well structured is your answer? Do you have paragraphs? have your sentence structure is correct. And again, sentence structure comes into play when you're looking at grammatical range and accuracy, presentation of good grammar, use of the correct tense, sentence structures again, those kind of things will be looked at in the assessment criteria. So it's quite important that you know what you're being assessed on. So when you're preparing and on the day of the exam, you will know where you can work harder. Okay, so in the writing task 1, you will be faced with 7 different kind of questions can be presented, but you'll get one out of these. So as I have on screen, you can either be presented with a bar chart where you'll have to summarize a bar chart, or a line graph, or a pie chart. You might be asked to explain a certain kind of map, a process diagram, multiple graphs, or a table. And today we'll be looking at process diagrams. There are 2 kind of process diagrams that you might be faced with. One is a natural process. The other is a man-made process. So natural processes could include, for example, as we have on screen, the water cycle or photosynthesis. And man-made processes could be something like the production of a pencil, or the manufacturing of instant noodles, or the process to which you can get a driver's license. Okay, so these are 2 diagrams that you might be presented with. Again, natural and man-made processes. Let's start learning how to answer task number 1, process diagrams. So first of all, let's come up with a plan. I've done this as well for you guys, and you can also feel free to use this plan or use it as some sort of checklist during your exam or while you're preparing. So you can make a note of these, and when you're like starting the exam, have this checklist in place so that you know that one by one, when you finish writing the task, you'll be able to tick off everything on the checklist. We'll be going through this checklist in more detail as we go on through the presentation. First point is understanding the process. Second, paraphrasing the question. Third, process overview, giving an overview of the whole process. Fourth is expanding the process in more detail. And last but not least, checking your essay. Okay, now the next one that we're going to look at is the summary format, or the format in which your essay or your summary should be structured. Okay, so first of all, you'll have a couple of paragraphs. Your first paragraph will be your introduction, okay, where you're summing up everything that's happening or giving the introductory line. Next, paragraph 1 or paragraph 2 would be your overview. I've written paragraph 1 or paragraph 2 because you can either have a separate paragraph for your overview, or you can combine it with the first paragraph with your introductory line. It's not a problem where you put it, either or is fine. Accordingly, your next maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs will be the body paragraphs, and this is where you'll be explaining the process in more detail and giving more information about the process. Now you can see that there are just maybe a total of 3 to 4 paragraphs that you'll have in your answer, and you would have realized that maybe one is missing. Maybe you're thinking, should I conclude the whole essay? The answer is no, okay? There is no conclusion for task 1, okay? Because you're not inferring anything or you're not giving your opinion. So leave the conclusion out, save that for task number 2. Just remember that in your task 1, you should have these paragraphs listed, okay? So first of all, from the plan or our checklist, as we know, is understanding the process, okay? First of all, the examiner knows that you might not have seen this process before, and you yourself might not have seen the process presented on your paper, and that's totally fine. It doesn't mean that you have to go and learn, 10 different processes, or, how does photosynthesis work or anything like that. That's not necessary. Again, this is just a reminder that this IELTS exam is just testing your English skills. It's not about how much information you know, it's how you put that information down on paper. So when you understand the process, you can ask yourself these questions. First of all, you can ask yourself, where does the process start and where does the process end? You can also ask yourself, what is being produced? And how many stages are there? And also, what does each stage of the process do? Okay, so when you ask yourself these questions, you'll be able to, quickly understand everything, maybe within the first 2-3 minutes when you get your paper, look down, understand everything. So these kind of questions will help you write maybe your overview or the rest of the paragraphs, your detailed paragraphs, right? So for example, if you get a question on brick manufacturing, again, that's a man-made process. So you'll have to see where the process starts, maybe from, the raw materials are brought in and mixed together, and it ends with the bricks being shipped out for distribution. What is produced? Again, you'll know that bricks are being produced. How many stages are there? You can probably count the stages. There might be 4 to 5 stages listed on the page. And again, what does each stage of the process do? So just know that. Again, is it a man-made or a natural process? And is this process also cyclical or linear? Cyclical would be like in a circle, does it go around? Or just one linear process? So for example, the example that we took about taking bricks, it's more of a linear process. But if you're looking at something like the water cycle, it has the name cycle in itself, it goes in a circle. Okay. Next, paraphrasing the question. Paraphrasing in the IELTS exam, be it the writing or the speaking or any which one you face, is a very important skill to know. This is because it shows the examiner that you know how to take information and process it in your own way, but still stick to the actual phrase that they're trying to convey. Okay, so paraphrasing is very, very important. So do know how to paraphrase, do understand what paraphrasing is. Again, paraphrasing is just taking the same phrase or taking the same sentence and rewording it by using different vocabulary, different synonyms to convey the same meaning, the same original meaning. Okay? All right, so paraphrasing is usually used in paragraph 1, which is your introduction. Okay? So for every question, there's the same format that you'll get. You'll get general information and you'll get the instructions. So the general information, for example, would be the diagram below shows the process of photosynthesis. So it's giving you an overview of what the question would be about. And then you'll get the instructions where it'll be something like summarize the information by selecting or reporting the main features and make comparisons wherever relevant. So this is where task achievement comes into play, the criteria, where the examiner will see whether you've answered this instruction. So let's go on to see how we can paraphrase, give examples of paraphrasing. So let's take the first example that we have. The diagram shows the process of photosynthesis. A paraphrased line would be, the illustration demonstrates how plants produce energy from sunlight. See how it's paraphrased? We've done, the diagram below shows, instead of saying that, we said the illustration demonstrates. We've used synonyms and different words to convey the same meaning, but in a better way. Okay, how plants produce energy from sunlight. That is basically the definition of photosynthesis. So we've taken the definition and put it in our introduction. Let's look at another example. Another one. The diagram below shows how electricity is produced in a nuclear power plant station. Paraphrased would be, again, the illustration below shows. Here, the paraphrase line would be, the process of how nuclear power plants make electricity. Okay, so the first one is saying how electricity is produced in a nuclear power station, and the paraphrased version is how nuclear power plants make electricity. Okay, so understand that you should paraphrase the introductory sentence. Okay, make sure that you learn how to paraphrase, and it's again repeating that it's a very important skill to learn. So do put a little bit more effort into learning about paraphrasing as well. Okay, next paragraph would be the process overview, or the overview of the process, or the summary of the process. Okay, so this would either be, again, combined with your first paragraph or the second paragraph. So an overview, when we look at the word overview, when we think about the definition, it means giving a broad summary or a broad idea of what the whole process is about. Okay, so here again, remember when we looked at the beginning, understanding the process, and we had a couple of questions. Here's where those questions come into play. Again, you will be asking yourself, Where does it start and where does it end? Is it a man-made or a natural process? How many stages are there? Is it a cyclical process or a linear process? All these questions that we've asked now, the answers is what you can put in your overview. Okay, and as we go on, we'll see an example question and how to answer these as well. Okay, so remember that you can add these points in your overview to make sure that you get that point in there as well. Okay, the next few paragraphs, like we discussed, would be explaining the process. Okay, so you will have to have maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs where you'll explain in detail about the process. Okay, so here you can mention, what does each stage do? What does each stage consist of? What does each stage produce, or what is the overall production? What are you producing by the end of it? Are there any materials added? So before we took the example of bricks, so maybe there might be some raw materials, or for example, you'll have maybe cement and sand mixed together. So you can add that in your explanation. Say, you know, sand and cement are mixed together to create these bricks, for example. Also, you can discuss the relationship with the previous or subsequent stages. Here, this just means if stage 1 and stage 2 are connected, write that down. Say, as you know, the raw materials are brought in, it is then moved on to the production stage where the bricks are formed, or something like that. So connect the stages as well. And that shows that you understood, you know, you've made inference and you've linked both processes together to show the examiner that, you know, you've understood the process. Okay, and you can also do this by sequencing the process. Now, when we talk about sequencing the process, how can we do this? By the use of language and vocab. That will definitely boost your lexical resource score and also your grammatical score as well. Okay, so when we say sequencing, you can use words like firstly, followed by, meanwhile, and linear. Okay, these are just examples. Or you can do, you know, second of all, first of all, subsequently, meanwhile, like we've written here. So firstly, the raw materials are gathered, followed by their processing. Meanwhile, the temperature of the furnace is increased. This is a linear process. So this shows the examiner that you have used a wide range of vocabulary, and trust me, it would definitely boost your score. Okay. Right, so let's do an example question together. Let's see how we can take this question and use whatever skills we've learned just now to answer. So here's the question. The diagram below shows how instant noodles are manufactured. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons wherever relevant. So the general idea is telling us that this is how instant noodles are manufactured. And the instructions, they want us to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons wherever relevant. Okay? So have a look at the different steps. Okay? Now, let's create our introduction sentence or paragraph 1. Let's rephrase and say, the given picture illustrates the process by which instant noodles are produced. So here, we've changed the diagram below shows, and we've made it the given picture illustrates. It's the same meaning, but we've just rephrased it, okay? The process by which we're using our sequencing words, and that's boosting our score. And instead of saying manufactured, we've used the word produced, okay? So this is an example of an introduction that you can give. Next comes what? The overview. Okay, so now we're going to give an overview. We're going to keep those questions in mind that we had before. How does it start? How does it end? How many steps are there? What is being added in those steps? All that we can add into our overview. So let's see. I've given you the arrows, as you can see. There are 8 steps. Okay, the arrows are showing us 8 steps, okay, that we can add into our overview. We can see that it starts with the storage silos, storing the flour, and we can also see that it ends by labeling and sealing. Okay, so here's an example of a question that we can use. Overall, now I just want to pause there and tell you about this word overall. By the use of the word overall, you are showing the examiner that it's summing up the whole thing. So that word overall is crucial and it will boost your score if you use that. Okay, so remember, if anything at all, when you're giving your overview, start your sentence with overall. Okay, so here we go. Overall, it is clear that there are 8 stages in this linear process, commencing with storing flour in the silos and ending with labeling and sealing cups. So do you see how we've kind of briefly summarized this whole process? We didn't use too many words, we didn't use too many phrases, we just said there are overall, how many stages there are? There are 8 stages. It's a linear process, meaning it's going in one line, as you can see, right? It's going just in one line, not in a circle. And instead of saying starting with, we've upgraded our vocabulary and we said commencing with storing flour in the silos and ending with, again, keyword, labeling and sealing cups. So we've covered the stages, we've covered what type of process it is, we've told the examiner where it starts and where it ends. So that seems like a full overall paragraph. All right, let's move on to the detail part, paragraphs 3 and 4. Now, this will be a little text heavy. Let's, bear with me and let's go through it. So let's see what we can say for the first one. At the first stage, or you can rephrase and say first of all or firstly, okay? Here we've done at the first stage of this process, flour is pumped from a truck into tower silos for storage before being put into a mixing machine, where it is mixed with a combination of water and oil. After this stage has been completed, and I'll tell you why that's underlined as well, the resulting mixture is rolled over to create a dough sheet, and then going through a machine to be separated into strips. So let's look at this. In this paragraph, we've summed up steps 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Actually, 4 steps we've summed up, okay? So at the first stage is underlined because it's a sequencing sentence, a sequencing vocabulary word, okay? First of all, at the first stage, firstly, things like that, okay? We're telling how the process is going. We're going through the stages, we're going through each step, but we're just bringing everything together into one line, okay? Now it says, after this stage has been completed. Has been completed shows that you're using a different tense. As of right now, the first few sentences is in the present or in the past present. But when you look at has been completed, it ups your score for grammatical accuracy and also lexical resource, right? So it boosts your score. So do learn which tenses you can use, learn your tenses, past, present, or future, so that you can use that in your answer, okay? Right, now this covers stages 1 to 4. Definitely there should be another paragraph to cover stages 5 through 8, okay? I'm saying this because we have a tendency maybe to write everything into one paragraph. Let's not do that. Let's separate it into 2 paragraphs so it shows our cohesion and coherence score, and it'll boost that score. Because if we have everything in one chunk, it'll just, show the examiner that, it's not very organized and the format is a little off. So make sure you don't write all your details in one paragraph, and make sure you separate it into maybe 1 or 2 more or 3 paragraphs at the most. Remember, do keep the word count in mind. You have 150 words and you can go slightly over as well, but do try and keep it between 150 to 170 words. Okay, so let's look at the next paragraph. Here's how it starts. During the next stage, these dough strips are molded into noodle discs, after which they are cooked with oil and left to dry. Following this, these dried noodle discs, together with vegetables and spices, are put into cups, and the process finally ends with these cups being labeled and sealed. So do you see how we've used a bit more lexical resources? We've put in a bit more sequencing vocabulary and sequencing words to carry our paragraph through. During the next stage, okay, that's a big point right there. Okay, we've told in brief detail, or we're supposed to explain a little bit more, but we've told it. saying that they're molded into discs. That's stage 5 covered. Then after which a good connecting word, after which they are cooked in oil and they are fried. So that's covering step number 6. And then following this, they are dried and vegetables and spices are added. That's covering step number 7. So remember we talked about when we're asking ourselves and understanding the process, what is being mixed in, what is happening in each each step. So it's very important to understand the process and know that so you can quickly write these things down. Okay, and put into cups, and process finally ends. So we're ending it, not really concluding, giving a conclusion, but we're saying it in a different way. And the process finally ends with these cups being labeled and sealed. So there, in the second paragraph, we've covered steps 5 through 8, and the first paragraph 1 to 4, right? And we've divided it into 2 paragraphs. So again, if you get, by chance, if you get a process diagram where you have 10 steps, 5 steps can be explained in the first paragraph, and the other remaining five can be explained in the next paragraph. So make sure that your paragraphs are well structured and you have everything. So do follow the format that was given, which is paragraph 1, the introduction, 2, the overview, 3 and 4, the details. Okay, so let's see how this answer is put all together, what it looks like on the paper. All right, I'll read it for you. The given picture illustrates the process by which instant noodles are produced. Overall, it is clear that there are 8 stages in this linear process, commencing with storing flour in silos and ending with labeling and sealing cups. At the first stage of this process, flour is pumped from a truck into tower silos for storage before putting into a mixing machine, where it is mixed with a combination of water and oil. After this stage has been completed, the resulting mixture is rolled over to create dough sheets and then through a machine be separated into strips. During the next stage, these dough strips are molded into noodle discs, after which they are cooked with oil and left to dry. Following this, these dry noodle discs together with vegetables and spices are put into cups, and the process finally ends with these cups being labeled and sealed. How did you find that answer? Did we cover all the steps? Did we mention how many steps there are? Did we cover what is being produced? I think so. I think that this is a pretty good answer, resulting in a band probably 7 to 8, or maybe even 9. As you can see the word count below, this is 151 words. So we have, stayed in the word count, you have to write at least 150 words. We've written 1 extra. Okay. Right. So here are some tips for you. Okay. First of all, when you're preparing, understand the marking criteria. Again, once you have understood the marking criteria, it's easy for you to prepare, go into it and see, okay, I need to probably work on, the lexical resource criterion. Or maybe I should work on how I should structure my paragraphs for cohesion and coherence. Or, whether I'm answering all of the question to work on task assessment. So make sure that you understand how you're being marked, okay? Second of all, learn how to paraphrase. I cannot stress this enough, how important it is to understand how to paraphrase. This is by, and this goes with the next point as well, boosting your vocabulary. So learn how to paraphrase, learn how to rewrite sentences using different words, different synonyms, different vocabulary, okay? And also boost your vocabulary. Now here the limitation is that when you're going to boost your vocabulary, you might get a little overexcited and think, okay, I need to cram and learn all this vocabulary. But the thing is, sometimes when you've learned the vocabulary and you want to put it down when you're writing the exam, that vocabulary that you've learned may not fit in with what you're writing, and that'll be a problem. So make sure you learn vocabulary, learn the meaning, learn how it's used, so that you use it appropriately during your exam. Okay, and last but not least, check your work. This is very, very important because here you can also lose marks, maybe, if you don't check your work. So when you're checking for your work by the end of the exam, you're checking for whether you have enough paragraphs. Your spelling is very important during this time. Make sure that you've spelled things correctly. Make sure that your grammar and punctuation is all there. things like that. So make sure you're checking your work. Here you can also check the word count. Make sure you're not under the word count, but just a little over. Okay? Right. So now it's time for an audience Q&A. Okay. Right. If you have questions, now is the time to ask them. Right. Also, right, I can see the poll that we've had before where we've asked which section of the IELTS is have you found the most difficult? A lot of you have said the writing section. So I think it's a very good thing that we had a little section about this topic on the writing section today. Okay, while we're waiting for more questions, guys, you can take this opportunity to, connect with the fellow attendees that are present here today. Also, you can take this opportunity to connect with me. And once you do that, you'll be able to see all the upcoming talks that we have or that I have coming up regarding the IELTS. You can book one-to-one Skylist and things like that. So do connect with me as well. Okay, right. So our first question we have here from Vinny is, will the academic IELTS writing task 1 always be a graph or a chart, a table or map or a process? Okay, that's a pretty good question. First of all, as we discussed at the beginning, there are 7 different types of questions that could come up, and out of the 7, you would get 1. So it could be a graph, it could be a chart, it could be a table, it could be a pie chart, it could be a line graph, it could be the process diagram, it could be a map, or it could be a table. So 1 out of these 7 questions will be there for writing task 1. But yes, it would always be one of those 7. Okay. Another question that we usually get for the writing exam, another common question would be, what is the marking criteria? So we talked about the assessment criteria, but we didn't talk about the marking criteria. So here, we'll just quickly, briefly go through that. It would be each section. So out of the 4 criteria, you'll be getting marks, a band score between 0 to 9. Okay, so for lexical resource, you'll be getting a band score of 0 to 9. And then for the other 4, you'll be getting, other 3, sorry, you'll be getting a score for that. So what happens is once you get marked on that, it will be added together an average, presenting you your score for writing task 1. Again, remember that the writing section, academic section, writing academic section has 2 parts. That's writing task 1 and writing task 2. Okay, so writing task 1, everything is 25%, the criteria 25%, which amounts to 33% of your overall writing score, and the remaining would be for writing task 2. Okay, all right. Does my handwriting matter in the paper-based writing task 1 test? Okay, that's a good question as well. Your handwriting doesn't matter so much, but it does matter as well. It's a little tricky how I answered that, but I'll explain even further. Your handwriting should be clear. It should be legible. Okay, the examiner should be able to read your handwriting. The problem, what happens is if your handwriting is illegible, if the examiner is unable to understand what's there, then you will be probably marked down because they can't read it. So do make sure when you're practicing that you're also, kind of paying a little bit of attention to your handwriting as well. Make sure it's clearly legible. Maybe once you've finished, when you're practicing and you finish writing your summary or your essay, whatever it may be, give it to a family member or friend to check over to see whether they can read what you've written as well. Okay. All right. What are the time management strategies to answer that writing task 1 process diagrams? So not only process diagrams, for all task 1, it's advised that you spend at least 20 minutes on this task because in total for the writing section, you will have 1 hour. So you can divide it into 20 minutes and for task 2, 40 minutes, okay? How you choose to use your 20 minutes of time for task 1 is up everything, set in that time. Okay, so 20 minutes is the advised time that you should spend on task number 1, solely because it's a shorter task and all you have to do is summarize. most of your time will go into task 2, where you'll spend 40 minutes. Okay. Another question that's been asked usually is, what is a good band score? Okay, people are usually wondering, what's a good band that might be accepted if I'm going into uni, or maybe if I'm just going abroad. So I would say, and in general, the thing is, maybe a band score between 6, 6.5, or 7 to 9 would be a pretty decent score. Okay, where is the IELTS Writing Task 1? The internet has a plethora of resources that you can use to practice for your IELTS writing and reading, or whichever one it is. If we're talking about writing, as they've asked, sample process diagrams, the official IELTS website has that as well for you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And also, guys, sorry, just to be deviating from the question and answer session as well. At the end of this session, you'll be getting a feedback link. So do give your feedback, okay, if you thought this session was helpful for you. It'll be in the conversation that has been started regarding this Nbyula Talk. So do go ahead and answer. Okay. We have time for one more question. So let's see. Okay, how long should my IELTS Writing Task 1 answer be? Are the marks deducted if my answer is shorter or longer? Okay, so in this case, take the word count into consideration. You have to write at least 150 words. That means nothing less. If you write a little bit less, maybe let's say 140 words, or I dare I say it, 149 words, you might get penalized, at least if it's 140 words, okay? You'll get penalized for it by, your marks will come down in one of the criterias. So try and make sure that you write 150 words. A little over is also fine, okay? And yeah, make sure you at least keep it between, figure would be 150 to max 170. Because what happens is, if you write even more, let's say 180 or 200 words, think about it, you'll be spending a little extra time on writing task 1 when you could use that time to write task 2. Remember, there are 2 tasks. So try not to spend so much time. 20 minutes is a decent, time to spend to write 150 words. Okay, right. Okay, guys, so I think we are coming to the end of today's talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you found this video helpful, if you found this talk helpful, please do like, share, and subscribe it. If you have friends who are preparing for the IELTS as well, and you think that this will be useful for them to learn from, please do share it with them as well. Again, do, sign the feedback form and give us feedback. And yes, looking forward to seeing you guys for our next talk, where we'll be discussing how to introduce yourself during the speaking exam. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope this talk was helpful for you. See you next time.